Hello, welcome to another Uncomfortably Candid podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about something else that came up in conversation a while back that was interesting and taught me something. Um, I'm always learning. I think it's great to never stop learning. Anyway, I'm going to talk to you today about inclusion versus intentionality. Inclusion is one of my top 10 strengths, and I love having that strength. Um, but it can be overused if you don't steward it well. I also have responsibility in my top 10, and I catch myself taking on responsibility that isn't mine, and I have to step back and ask myself, okay, Kaylee, what are you actually responsible for? And also, I think I've talked about this before, my empathy strength can be overused, and can forget that I even have needs of my own because I'm too busy meeting the needs of other people. And that's not healthy. And that's why it's so important to steward these strengths well and to be able to utilize them in the most beneficial way. And for I'm just going to read to you a little bit about the includer strength. People who have this strength are aware of exclusion and understand its repercussions. You have a high level of tolerance with an acceptance of diversity. You have to make room for everyone. You love assimilation and integration, and you hate cliques. And the motto is all are welcome here. So, for anyone who has ever been rejected, not included, then hopefully you didn't turn into a people pleaser like me that wanted to make sure that everyone felt seen, heard, known, valued, and that they were included. That's wanting to do the exact opposite of what we fear. And then, maybe it won't happen to us. And that's not true. It will probably still happen to us. So I hope this podcast will just alleviate some of that pressure. Someone was talking to me about reconnecting with a friend, and they had only hung out a few times, but she was thinking about whether or not she should invite this person to her birthday party. And I told her about the rings that I've talked about on this podcast before, and how the closer ones are in the middle, and then the farther out they get more distant. And I said, unless the party is, you know, you're going to invite everyone, then you're probably not going to be inviting someone that is in an outer ring to an intimate birthday dinner. And just, you've been out and hung out twice. So she probably hasn't, you know, moved into any of those closer rings. And then I said, would you expect her to invite you to her birthday at this point in the relationship? And she was like, absolutely not. And I was like, well, then there you go. I was like, but how can you be intentional with her, and not feel like you have to include her in your birthday party? And so being intentional with someone requires you to know the expectations of the relationship and your capacity, what you can give. And I was so bad at this before I understood and became aware of how to utilize my includer strength. I was in ministry school, and we had these smaller groups where we would meet once every week, and I would get there early and try to say hey to as many people as possible. And as soon as it started, we would all sit in this circle, and I would go around the circle picking out people that I didn't get a chance to say hey to before, so that I could make a mental note and say hey to them afterwards. And I would literally chase them to the door and stand at the door while they were on their way out just to make sure. I said, hey to them. I, that's crazy, right? Like, that's crazy. Any sane person would be like, that's crazy. And I did finally come to my senses, but there was so much pressure and it stressed me out and it was exhausting. And then I felt so much guilt and shame if I missed a few people. And it's just not worth it. And so I do love this strength. I love all of my strengths. I think that the includer strength, you know, can bring people together, can make them feel accepted for who they are, and allow people to be their authentic selves. But the way that I was living out this strength was not worth the pressure because you can't be everyone's BFF. And I think it took me 30 years to figure that out. But once I did, the pressure just went whoop. And, Jesus, he had his three in his close circle, then he had his 12 apostles, and then he had his 72 disciples. Even Jesus, couldn't be BFFs with everyone. So why I felt like I could, I'll never know. But I tried. I was like, I'm going to love everyone and everyone's going to love me. I remember this one girl. We hit it off. We laughed until we cried and just had so much fun. But I remember her telling me, like, Kaylee, I don't know if I have the capacity to be intentional with you in this season. And at first I was like, well, fine. You don't know what you're missing out on. But then I realized, you know, I became thankful for how honest and brave she was in that moment. And I realized that instead of disappointing me later by being unintentional with me because she knew her capacity and that she didn't have any for me in this season, she was able to let me know that up front. And yeah, it was disappointing, but I feel like after thinking about it, I would have much rather had someone be honest with me up front than disappoint me down the line. Because, and it just showed me, how intentional she must be with her current relationships. And I'm not superwoman, I'm just human. And I realized I can't be intentional with everyone or I'll end up being intentional with no one. You still can make someone feel seen, known, valued, included by being intentional with them in the capacity you are able to give. And that's why it's so important to be aware of that and to know the expectations of the relationship. So I hope this podcast encourages you and, like I said, alleviates some of the pressure to feel like you need to include everyone, that it's okay to be intentional in your own way and in what you are able to give in the season that you're in, depending on the type of relationship it is. I'm going to be more intentional, and because intentionality requires vulnerability, it requires time, it requires work. And I'm going to be more intentional with those people in my close covenant relationships than I am with someone that I've just reconnected with or someone that I'm just acquaintances with. And it's important to know that. Otherwise, you'll get, burnt out, exhausted like I did when I was running around trying to say hello to everyone to make them feel loved. It's unrealistic. And it's important to set realistic expectations for yourself. And I'll probably be doing some podcasts on different strengths like this. And if you have one that you want to hear about, go to my website and contact me that way. And thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.